Good morning. Good to see you all here. Good morning, good morning. Glad to have those of you who are joining us online. My name is Katie. I'm the Worship Arts Director here. And as always, we love to start with singing. So if you're up for it, rise or stand and we will sing together. that shines over everyone. We look to you. We long for you, oh Lord. Amen. You can have a seat.
Well, good morning, everybody. Always love being greeted by the kids in the front. My name's Jeremy. I am the pastor here of the Grove Cottage Grove, and it is great to be with you on this beautiful, beautiful late October morning. We are a brand new church that seeks to grow goodness. So we hope that every interaction that you have with us, whether you are in this room with us today, whether you are watching online with us because you're sick, because you're traveling. You know how many texts I got this morning from people saying, we're all sick, we're going to be watching online today. Whether you're in the room or sick or traveling or out in the community throughout the week, we hope that every interaction that you have with us is somehow nurturing, healing, wholeness, and beauty in your life.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jordan. I'm one of the worship leaders here at the Grove. And if you want to take a look at your little worship bulletin that you were given on your way in, on the inside there's a little insert that you can fill out your information to learn more about the Grove, or just give us your information if you're interested in certain things so that we can get that stuff out to you.
Another thing that's in there is information about giving, and as you know, if you've been around here for a while, we have been in the middle of this stewardship campaign trying to get our commitments ready for the coming ministry year for 2023. If you are a part of the Grove and have not yet done that, we'd encourage you to do that as well. It helps us for planning to be able to say, hey, what are we able to actually accomplish in the next year? And for you out there, it's an opportunity for you to say, this is the commitment that I am making as a part of this church to grow goodness in and through this community. If you want to do that today, there are more of these on the back table that if you want to pick one of these up and actually fill it out today and put it in the baskets back there, you can. That's also the spot where if you fill out the worship handouts, you can drop them later in the service too. I want to direct you to the back of these worship handouts for the three most important things to draw your attention to for this month. First of all, Atlas of the Heart. This is the worship series that we're continuing today, looking at our big feelings, basically, and how we can notice, pay attention to, make meaning of, and then navigate those feelings. We'll be continuing that later today. Get involved. We hope that everybody who considers this to be a part of their, to be their church community is able to say, you know what, I want to find a place where I can use my gifts and passions to contribute to this community. If you want to look at all of the different opportunities that are out there, you can go to the link on there. You can scan the QR code to look at all of the different positions that we have actually listed out. If you know, you're like, I want to do this specific thing that can contribute to the life of the church, you can let us know there as well. If you have no idea what you want to do, you know you want to get involved, but you have no idea what you want to do, you have no idea what your gifts or passions are when it comes to volunteer opportunities, we can help you figure that out as well. And then the last thing on the bottom, which we're simply referring to as billions of stories, none like yours. This has been a growing church community. We've been having more and more people say that they find the Grove, Cottage Grove, to be their church home. And as a part of being part of this community, people are experiencing transformation and change and healing, wholeness, and beauty in their lives for the first time or the first time in a long time. And we want to be able to celebrate and share those stories with you. So if you are one of those people who are like, I have experienced that for myself for the first time or the first time in a long time, we want to acknowledge that, celebrate along with you, and then help you to tell that story. So we're going to be giving lots of opportunities for you to do just that.
As you can see, kids are very valued here at the Grove, and there's lots of different options for them. In the pews, there's little clipboards with activity sheets. Parents, don't be ashamed if you use these as adults as well. We also have our little wiggle space off to the side. We love having kids in worship, so if that's something that they're interested in doing, we love having the noise of kids in worship. And then also we have the Grove kids and the nursery out in the Commons area. And so after, in a little while, we'll sing a song to have our kids lead out. And if you haven't been to the Grove Kids before, there's a little registration card that we just ask that you fill out one of these per family. They're in the pews as well. And then there's information on the Grove Kids on the back, if you hadn't seen that before. Nursery is 6 weeks through 3 years, and then the Grove Kids is 4 years through 5th grade.
Connection point.
Connection point, yes. So the connection point is a great opportunity to get to know those around you. And so today we're going to be talking about sadness and grief and loss. And so our question for today is, what is your favorite sad movie? So why doesn't everyone go ahead and stand up and find somebody that you don't know in the room, and you can talk about this question and get to know somebody a little bit better.
All right, y'all can wrap it up and head back to your seats. Sorry to break up the party. We love a good sad movie. Any Disney movie or children's movie is the correct answer because they all start out with some sort of sad thing. All right, well, hey, speaking of kids stuff, we're going to transition our kids out to Grove Kids. And if you've not been with us before, we sing them a little song on their way out. So let's do that. Well, if you've been here at any point in October or have watched online, you'll know that we have been focusing on, we're calling it Sign Up to Serve Month, but signing up to serve happens all year long. So don't let that stop you if you haven't signed up for anything yet. But we're basically acknowledging the fact that we've grown a lot as a church, especially in the last 6 months. Like, we grew over the summer, and that's not a thing that churches usually do. And we want to be able to make sure we can accommodate that growth, not only because we're seeing lots of new faces all the time, and we want to make sure our areas of volunteering are covered so that this is an enjoyable, comfortable, hospitable experience for people. But also, we know that it's important when we're a part of a church. Like, if you call this your church home, it's important that we find ways to contribute to our church home and our family as well. So we want to make sure you know what is available if you've been wanting to help out, and we're giving you some opportunities to do that. So today, this is our last Sunday we're going to be talking about it, and today we are focusing on a whole big category of what I'm calling property care. Now, this could be anything indoors, anything outdoors. I don't know if you've recognized this. We have a huge outdoor property. Like, we take up like an entire city block. It's pretty incredible. We've only used about half of it at this point, but we still got to care for it. And we have this incredible building that we've inherited that we get to worship in and do potlucks and events and all that sort of stuff. We want to take care of it. And most churches have staff people that do these things. Our church does not have staff people that do these things. We have 3 part-time staff, of which I am one, and we all staff contribute to property improvements and care, but we also rely heavily on volunteers. And there's lots of different areas that we have property care. And a couple of people who've been really leading the charge with some of this property care, so I'm going to introduce them in a minute. I do want to say that this isn't as black and white as the other volunteer opportunities. The other ones we could say, like, okay, for this role, you show up at this time on Sunday morning and you serve for this long or whatever. This is a lot more fluid because we are still figuring out what property care looks like for us. But I will first introduce one person who has been at this church for a very long time. If you don't know, before we were the Grove, there was another church that met here on this property and in this building. We still have some of those same people from that church, and one of them is Warren Samuelson. Warren, will you stand up so people can see you? And yay, Warren! Thank you. Warren does all kinds of things. Warren's been a huge part of building projects. He's a woodworker, so you can see things around this building that he has made, like the little free pantry out there, and the stage he was a part of building, and that big tall table out there. Lots of things like that Warren builds, and he's been able to team up with other woodworkers and crafty people here in the congregation to do different things. Warren also mows the grass, which I imagine takes you many hours. And he does other things like he helped plunge the toilet one day. He helps water the piano. I know. Warren's the real MVP here. Little things like we got to keep the piano watered. Who knew? It's got to stay humid in there. So little things like that. Warren's our general property sort of management guy. He knows this property because he's been here for decades, and he also is handy. And so if any of you are like, oh, I'm handy in any of those ways, come talk to Warren. There may not be specific projects, or there might be. Or it might just be Warren, like yesterday he said, I noticed we need the leaves cleaned up in the parking lot. Let's see if we can get some people together to do that. And Warren kind of organized that. So Warren's a good guy to talk to if you're handy and can contribute in any of those ways. All right, now I want to introduce you to another amazing, faithful congregation person. Royanne, will you come up here, actually? This is Royanne. Kelberg? How do you say? Kelberg. Royanne, like Warren, that's okay. Pull it off the top there. There you go. She's also been here for a long, long time at the church before it was the Grove, so she knows this property well and has loved this property well and cared for it for a long time. And a lot of the landscaping type work that you've maybe noticed being done recently, Ryan sneaks in midweek and does some stuff, and also has teamed up with other people. We did a big landscaping project back in August, was it? And I think Royanne was here putting in hours more than anybody. It was pretty. Warren too, yeah. So it's really cool to see you work and to see how much you love and care for this property after being here all these years. And we're trying to put some organization to this because we're recognizing that like that one big push in August to do landscaping work is not going to be enough going forward. We're going to, in the warm season, need to be doing more projects. And maybe there's some stuff we can do in the cold season as well to just like little things, ongoing care for our property, but also like some big projects a couple times a year too. So, so Royanne has agreed to, along with Amanda's help, where is she? She must be out there, to kind of lead the sort of landscaping or beautification team, or we don't really have a name for it yet, but do you want to tell us about that and kind of what you see falls under your category?
A lot. Is this working now? Can you hear me?
A little closer.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay. Well, you may have noticed we've really been in what I would term cleanup mode. And a lot of pruning, a lot of hauling away brush, a lot of digging out of things, just getting caught up on things. And we have one person from Woodbury, Dick Hansen. He has been coming down and pruning faster than Warren can haul it away. So we really need, coming up in the spring, someone who has a truck, a trailer, an SUV to help haul away brush, because that is a real biggie. So, and weed whipping is always needed. Watering, the watering right now is primarily indoors. We're done with the outdoor stuff. And I noticed, Pam, your mother must have done the planters in front of the church. So that was so nice to come and see not dead plants today. So to enjoy that. And moving forward, I think over the winter it would be nice. Pam had made some suggestions as to landscaping projects that we may need to tackle in the spring. And I'm hoping we could get a group together to make some of those decisions. I'm not comfortable just going ahead, and I don't know about Amanda either. If she's, we need people, even if you have like, maybe you only can attend a meeting, 1 or 2 meetings this winter to help us just plan what we want to do in the spring. So that's.
Yeah. And so I'm hearing there's some stuff for people with green thumbs to do, people that love plant care and are good at it. And also there's roles probably for people that, like when the time comes to do projects, people to haul stuff away or do weeding or cut branches and things like that too.
Yep. We also have coming up, our holiday season is vastly approaching. And we do have an opportunity to get plants from Gertens. If anyone is interested in that, contact me. We can, Woodbury does this. We can buy poinsettias and other plants to help decorate our do we refer to this as our stage?
Sure,
or,
yeah.
Okay. To help decorate our area. So if you're interested in that, contact me and I can help you with that.
Cool. Thank you. I think so, yeah. Anything sort of landscaping, plant care, if you're interested in that, come talk to Royanne. Obviously, Warren's work overlaps a lot with that, so come talk to either of them and we'll figure it out. But thank you. Can we give another big thanks to Royanne and Warren for all they've done? Yes. And then really briefly, 3 other things that fall under the umbrella of property care. One is cleaning. Again, most churches have a staff person that does like clean the bathrooms and vacuums and stuff like that. We don't. Sometimes we're able to pay somebody to come do that, and sometimes it's volunteering. So if you are someone who could come in like on a Friday afternoon or a Saturday and just spend an hour wiping down the bathrooms and doing some spot vacuuming or something, that would be really helpful. Because especially we have preschool playtime happening now on Friday mornings, which is incredible, and there's dozens of grown-ups and littles in here making a beautiful mess, and we just want to make sure that it's a clean place to come back to on a Sunday morning. So if you're able to contribute that way, let, I don't know, Jeremy or I know. We didn't really figure that out. Let somebody on staff know. Another thing would be holiday decorating, if that's a thing that interests you. We got tubs of stuff up in the attic. Last year we just put a couple of trees together and some lights. We keep it pretty simple, nothing huge. But if you're like, oh, I would super love decorating for Christmas or Easter or whatever, come talk to us, and who knows, you might be the new team lead on that. Look out. And then the last thing is, we live in Minnesota. Winter is coming. Snow will need to be moved. We have someone that does the plowing, correct? But also it might be, I was thinking about this, it might be good if anybody else has a plow. It might just be good to know in case our plow person, is sick or can't come or something. So if anybody, that's secondary. But mainly we need anybody who's willing to come a little bit early and shovel the sidewalk so that it can be safe for people to come to worship after a Saturday snow. So I think that's it. Definitely come find us if you want to help with any of that in a small capacity or a large capacity, whatever works for you. So, thank you.
Can we give Royanne and Warren and that whole team, particularly those two, one more hand? Your work does not go unnoticed. If they did not do their work, it would very much go noticed. So, very appreciative to them. So, many of you know that I'm an early riser. I wake up quite early, basically every morning throughout the week. And usually that's the time when, before the kids wake up and like the craziness ensues at 7 a.m., I'm able to have a little bit of downtime. Often that's my reading time and my time to go out for a run or to exercise. However, there's one day a week where that's not the first thing that I do. On Wednesdays, at least over the last couple months, my Wednesday morning thing has been waking up early so that I could watch the new Star Wars show. Yeah. The new Star Wars show on Disney Plus is called Andor. Unless you are a diehard Star Wars fan, you may not have even heard of this show before. Who has heard of this show at least? Yeah, just a handful of you. Okay. So the thing about Andor is you haven't heard about it because there hasn't been as much marketing behind it. That's part of it. It's also just less popular because of like very specific parameters around the show. It's not big like The Mandalorian or even Book of Boba Fett or something like that. There's a few different reasons why that might be the case. One is because marketing, it hasn't been pushed as much. A part of the reason why they haven't done marketing as much is because it's not for kids. Kids could maybe watch it, but it's very clearly meant for adults. There are not space wizards with laser swords. Maybe fewer people want that. There's not a little baby green alien. It's also not toyetic. You know what toyetic means? Toyetic means it's really easy to sell toys. It's very clearly not a show made simply to sell toys. Paw Patrol, the reason that show exists is to sell toys. I'm completely convinced. Andor is not that whatsoever. It is not toyetic. And in some ways, it's actually really, the reason why I think it might be less popular than some of these other shows, either Star Wars shows or otherwise, is it's kind of hard to watch. It is very real and very raw about the experience of a normal person living under the threat of empire. It's a story of a refugee, of someone who was abandoned, of someone who was caught up in the machinery of a fascist empire, of someone who is experiencing grief and loss and anguish and sadness. And that's pretty difficult to watch. And yet, if you are willing to bear witness to it, if you're willing to dig into it and acknowledge what's going on, that grief and sadness and anguish can actually be a really powerful thing to witness. So, as we talked about earlier, we are in the middle of this series we kicked off last week called Atlas of the Heart. This is a series that's based on the book by Brené Brown. And the theme of this series is that we are trying to pay attention to our big feelings. We're trying to acknowledge our emotions as people of faith and as human beings. Say, rather than just pushing them off or pretending that they don't exist, maybe what we can do is we can acknowledge our big feelings. We can notice them. And having noticed them, we can maybe make meaning of those big feelings. And having noticed them and making meaning of those big feelings, maybe then we can start to navigate life with them. We become map makers, and we can observe other map makers who are saying, how can we make sense of the world and plot it in order to navigate it rather than simply ignoring it? And in order to get at doing some of that as people of faith, what we're doing is we're looking at the Psalms. Psalms is a book in our Old Testament that is a book of poetry and songs, and yet is also a book full of people who are map makers. We're watching these normal people 2,000 years ago live trying to notice and make sense of and navigate their big feelings as they come about. And so last week we talked about the big bucket of disconnection, of isolation, and of loneliness. And this week we are talking about grief and sadness and anguish. And again, to do that, we're going to the book of Psalms, and today we're going to be looking at Psalm 88. And I just want to acknowledge that Psalm 88 is perhaps the most hard to look at. There's actually a movement, and there have been several movements within not only the Christian tradition, but within the Jewish tradition to cut out Psalm 88, to completely remove it from the text and use within the church. And yet, I think the same thing that is true of Andor is true of Psalm 88. It is difficult to look at grief and sadness and anguish in the face, and yet if we do so, it's not only difficult to do, but it can be powerful to do. So, we're going to look at Psalm 88 and break it down a bit. O Lord God, who delivers me, day by day I cry out, and at night I pray before you. Listen to my prayer. Pay attention to my cry for help. For my life is filled with troubles, and I am ready to enter Sheol. They treat me like those who descend into the grave. I am a helpless man, adrift among the dead, like corpses lying in the grave, whom you remember no more, and who are cut off from your power. You place me in the lowest regions of the pit, in the dark places, in the watery depths. Your anger bears down on me, and you overwhelm me with all your waves. Selah. You cause those who know me to keep their distance. You make me an appalling sight to them. I am trapped and cannot get free. My eyes grow weak because of oppression. I call out to you, O Lord, all day long. I spread out my hands in prayer to you. Do you accomplish amazing things for the dead? Do the departed spirits rise up and give you thanks? Selah. Is your loyal love, Hesed, proclaimed in the grave, or your faithfulness in the place of the dead? Are your amazing deeds experienced in the dark region, or your deliverance in the land of the oblivion? As for me, I cry out to you, O Lord, in the morning. My prayer confronts you. O Lord, why do you reject me and pay no attention to me? I am oppressed and have been on the verge of death since my youth. I've been subjected to your horrors and am numb with pain. Your anger overwhelms me. Your terrors destroy me. They surround me like water all day long. They join forces and encircle me. You cause my friends and neighbors to keep their distance. Those who know me leave me alone in the darkness. End. So Psalm 88 in some ways is very familiar, and in many other ways is also very unfamiliar. On the one hand, it's familiar because it is one of these psalms that's known as a psalm of lament. There's several different psalms of lament that you can find in the book of Psalms. In fact, Psalm 88 is surrounded by, kind of bookended by, a couple other songs of lament. These are psalms in which, like, they're acknowledging the realness, the heaviness of life. Even that word Selah, which was plugged in there a couple of times, this is a word that's like plugged in specifically often into these lament psalms. It's supposed to be a break in the text where it means like pause, reflect, think about what you are experiencing as you read or as you hear this. And so in many ways, Psalm 88 is just another one of these psalms that you would expect when you're reading something about lament. But on the other hand, Psalm 88 is wholly different and wholly unfamiliar for a few different reasons. The first one is voice. There is a single voice that is speaking in this psalm. A lot of times in other psalms, even and especially in Psalms of Lament, you hear one person talking in one direction, and then maybe that same person starts talking to a second person, or there's an interjection later where there's a conversation that's going on between multiple people, and the one who starts is then switching direction to another part of the conversation in order to explain what they're dealing with. So another lament psalm might be one person saying, things are really bad and God is really bad. Oh, but you need to know that God isn't actually that bad. There is one voice in Psalm 88. It is this one person, this one psalmist who's speaking directly to God. It is a one-sided conversation where the psalmist is calling out God, acknowledging all the bad things that are happening, and saying, God, you are to blame for this. One voice. It's not typical to the other psalms. The second thing that's unique about Psalm 88 is the actual content, which is pretty dark. And even the imagery is really dark here. From the get-go, he talks about being a shade. Shade is almost like a ghost. He's not dead, but he kind of feels like he's dead. The grief and the sadness and the anguish is so overwhelming that he just kind of feels like he's floating through life. Everybody else is moving around through life normally, but he's just floating through, and nobody's able to take notice of him. Nobody's able to take notice of what he is experiencing, the grief, the sadness, and the anguish. And God's to blame for that, he says. God has thrown him down into the pits, into the darkness, into Sheol. Sheol is this Hebrew term which kind of refers to, in theology and cosmology, Sheol is the place below where we as humans are living. It is the place where the dead go. And 2,000 years later, as Christians, we might say, okay, well, if nothing else, in death we know that we are going to be with God. That is not the understanding of this psalmist. That is not the understanding of the theology and the cosmology at the time. Sheol was hell. Literally, it's translated in many places as hell. And so to die is to go to this region, go to this place, go to this existence where God has no presence and God has no influence. The experience of this man going through life with this grief and sadness and anguish is going through hell on earth. And it is leading to isolation from God, but also to other people. This grief is making him disconnected from other people, which is making him feel even more grief, more sadness, and more anguish, which is making him feel more isolated, and it's just going in this nasty circle, which he feels like he cannot possibly get out of, isolated from God and isolated from other people as a part of his grief and sadness and anguish. This book that has become really popular over the last several years, especially post-pandemic, written by Basil von Kolk. I think this is how you pronounce his name. The book is called The Body Keeps the Score. Have any of you heard of this book? More of you than have heard of Andor. All right. So The Body Keeps a Score. This is this psychologist who has spent decades trying to study how our bodies, our brains try to manage trauma And what they do is our brains convince us how to move forward, but the impacts on our bodies remain, whether we pay attention to them or not. And so van der Kolk writes about the impact on our bodies that trauma has, and this is what he says. You're going to have to skip ahead. I got them out of order. Isolation. Maybe I didn't get it. Trauma. There we go. Thank you, Robin. That's all on me. The essence of trauma is feeling God-forsaken, cut off from the human race. Someone who is experiencing trauma, who has experienced trauma, their mind has figured out how to deal with it while their body has not, and the essence of that trauma, of that experience of pain and loss and grief and sadness, is to feel God-forsaken, cut off from the human race, like what the psalmist is trying to say here. It's a wicked cycle. It goes over and over and over again as if you can't possibly get out of it. So those are the first two things that make the Psalm 88 unique. The third thing, though, is the resolution. Because there is no resolution. There is no bow that gets put on the end here. And as that single voice gets shared, as this psalmist is writing about his experience of grief and sadness and anguish and loss, there is no, yes, but it's all going to be okay. Yes, that's bad, but God is great. Most of these other lament psalms have at least a tag on the end that kind of tries to put a bow on it. That doesn't happen here. The psalmist has no time for that. It's almost as if he's not actually looking for resolution. It's almost as if he's wanting to introduce people into his experience of loss and pain and grief and sadness simply because he wants other people to take notice of it, to join him in it, to bear with him and help him in that experience of God-forsakenness. Not because he needs everything to be okay, not because he wants everything to be resolved, but because he wants other people to bear witness to it as well. In the book Atlas of the Heart, Brene Brown refers to this interview that she did with a grief expert named David Kessler, and this is what he said on her podcast. Each person's grief is as unique as their fingerprint, but what everyone has in common is that no matter how they grieve, they share a need for their grief to be witnessed. That doesn't mean needing someone to try to lessen it or reframe it for them. The need is for someone to be fully present to the magnitude of their loss without trying to point out the silver lining. Not trying to resolve it all. The history of this psalm is people trying to resolve it all. Again, like I said, some of the biggest names in church history have tried to get rid of this psalm because they thought that it was inappropriate to talk this way. They thought that it was inappropriate to talk about God in this way. And you know what I think of that? That is garbage. Instead, this is a prime opportunity for doing exactly what we have been saying we want to do in this series. It is a prime opportunity for us to notice our grief and sadness and anguish, for us to then make meaning of it, and then to try to navigate what life might look like on the other side. And to acknowledge that, to be real about the rawness of life and of grief is not an act that is inappropriate. It's not inappropriate to say things about God or to God like this. And in fact, I would argue it is an act of faithfulness. It's an act of faithfulness to ourselves and to God. Just this past week, I talked with somebody about the importance of fighting in marriage. It sounds weird. But when you fight in marriage, what it means is that you are continuing to be in the conversation together. It means that you haven't given up on one another. It means that there's something worth fighting about and fighting for. So when it comes to the relationship between God and us as humans, or between us and each other, this is an act of faithfulness to be able to stay engaged in the conversation, because God can handle it, and we can handle it. Returning once more to The Body Keeps a Score, it's kind of a dense book. And there's lots of different points at which Vander Kolk refers to very clinical types of things. This is how trauma arrives. This is how you deal with trauma, how you navigate trauma. And yet, with all of these different clinical things that he lays out, you know what he says? The number one, the most important thing to avoid trauma and to treat trauma is relationships. Relationships. Not drugs, not therapy. The number one intervention, not those other things, not to not acknowledge, double negative. Those other things are important, and he goes to chapters outlining the different approaches that you can take. But the number one thing he says is relationships. Study after study shows that having a good support network constitutes the single most powerful protection against becoming traumatized. Safety and terror are incompatible. When we are terrified, nothing calms us down like a reassuring voice or the firm embrace of someone we trust. What if the church could be like that? What if the church could be a place where we could create space to acknowledge, to notice, to make meaning of, and to navigate trauma and grief and sadness and anguish? What if the church was not the happiest place in town, but could be the most honest place in town? What if we could be people who made space like that? Well, good thing you're here, because that's what we're trying to do. And that's really what today is about too. In the church calendar, in the church tradition, this week, or there's a point in this week which is often referred to as All Saints' Day. It's actually on November 1st. Usually it gets celebrated in the church on the Sunday after November 1st, but we're going to do it before November 1st. All Saints' Day traditionally has been this day in which you acknowledge the people who come before you. Sometimes that has been acknowledging the saints, like the actual sainted people who have come before us. But it's also an opportunity for us to acknowledge the people in our lives who have gone before us and that we have lost. My guess is that there's been a whole lot of loss over the last year or the last couple of years for you. And so what we're wanting to do this morning is to be able to notice and make meaning of and start to navigate what that loss might be for us individually and for us as a church. So in just a moment, we're gonna have Melinda come up here and read something that she's put together that talks about the experience of grief and sadness and anguish. And then we're actually going to give you the opportunity. We have another song immediately after that where you're going to get the opportunity to come up here and to light a candle. And as you light the candle, it can be an acknowledgement of loss that you have experienced in your life. It might be a specific person, a specific situation. It's an opportunity for you to light the candle and to be able to notice, make meaning of, and start to navigate this life going forward. As we do this, once again, I simply want to acknowledge that God can handle this, that you can handle this, and that we can handle this together. So, may that be so. Come on, Melinda.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so grief and sadness and anguish, that's kind of what I was prompted to write on, and there were a few edits that I did end up making, so in order to not be distracted by the words that might be on the screen, I just invite you to close your eyes, just to let whatever feelings come to you that might. Okay. This is called In a Garden with God. In a garden on earth, we remember those we've lost and had with us. We remember those we've lost and never even met. For if our souls are eternal, perhaps there are souls we knew and loved, and souls we have imagined and loved who now know each other. Perhaps we only imagined them in dreams, in fleeting moments, but we knew the image was that of true love. Not fake love, not making this up love. Making this up. Who is to decide such an act? Jesus meets us where we are, in who we are, and in who we were created to be. Jesus, remember those we've lost. Jesus, help me to never forget either. I remember the baby who died inside her mother at birth, the one who never had her first breath. Jesus now holds them both. I remember the child who died in an accident while his parents desperately tried to rescue him. Jesus now comforts them all. I remember the mother who was taken far too soon from her family while the rest wondered who would tuck them in. Jesus stays beside them as they sleep. I remember that great-grandpa who died peacefully in his bed, perhaps the less tragic of these. Jesus is there too. Perhaps shifting from blindness to sight has nothing to do with our actual eyes, but how we see this world. After a death that should not have been, we see what is and decide what to do. I have decided on thankfulness. With each heartache, I've decided to embrace those who remain with new arms that are now all too aware of what emptiness is. I've decided, too, on acceptance, a radical acceptance that could save at least one life, if not many. Believing that others know their truth, believing I am blessed to walk beside them. We need not say the usual. God needed another angel. She was too good for this world. It must be meant to be. For that is not how life on earth is. Earth needs angels and good people, and every day things happen that force us to weep. So if your hands are empty today, raw and longing, know that there may not be a reason, but we can grow goodness out of sorrow. We can sow those seeds until we meet those we love again. Eternal rest, where everything makes sense, in a garden with God. Amen.
Thank you, Melinda. As we play this song, come and light candles for those you've lost when you're ready.
Someone should. I'm gonna let my heart break. I'm gonna
candles, we're going to invite our kids back in. We want to teach them these rhythms of grace as well that we go through throughout the year and throughout worship. So if you've lost somebody in your family and you would like your kids to participate in candle lighting as well, we're going to sing one more song together as we go out. Not a song that sort of erases and quiets our pain and everything we're going through. It still acknowledges the pain of life and also gives us that moment of hope that while we experience this hard stuff, good stuff grows up from the earth as well. So we'll sing this last song together. You're welcome to stand or rise. And again, kids, if you would like to light a candle with your grown-ups for somebody you've lost, a family member, a friend, a pet, a neighbor, you're welcome to come do that during this song. Change.
This is usually where I would get up and do announcements and say something smart alecky, but I don't want to ruin the moment. This is a lot, folks. It's a small table, but all of these represent some sort of loss and grief and sadness and anguish. And I want nothing more than for us to be a community where we can acknowledge this, notice it, start to make meaning of it, and then figure out how to navigate it together. And so, you're already standing. I'll have you extend your hands to receive this blessing. May we make space to bear witness to that anguish, that sadness, that grief. And may you trust that you can handle this, that we collectively can handle this, and that God can handle it too. May that be so.